Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 102 based on novel. Among the verdant mountains and forests, Xiao Yan crossed his fingers, held the back of his head from the back, and walked forward aimlessly with a lazy face. Nowadays, Chanjuabu has been difficult to make further progress. He can only rely on luck if he wants to break through to the wind. As for the strength of cultivation, Xiao Yang has been completely consolidated. In the early stage of the 5-star and half emperor, he is only a line away from the middle stage. He can't break through in a short time. There is no place to go and no way back. However, Xiao Yang can only find a place to settle down for the time being. A long time later, before Xiao Yang came to a waterfall, the turbulent water roared down from the high cliff like a wild horse. After several collisions with the protruding rocks on the cliff, it fell hard into a pool below, making a deafening roar. Around the pool, there is a fairly spacious open space. Xiao Yang can see that there is a cave beside the waterfall. The hole is not big enough for 4 people to enter at the same time. The more he looks inside, the sight will gradually become deep and quiet. There are many withered and yellow leaves blown by the wind at the mouth of the cave. Outside the cave, there are several dark campfires scattered by the wind. I think someone once lived here. Xiao Yang smiled. It seemed that he might live here for some time in the future. With a smile, Xiao Yang flashed into the cave. Sure enough, there was nothing in the empty cave except a stone bed and a few dim night pearls left on the cave wall, but it was enough for Xiao Yang. It's enough to have a foothold when practicing outside. It's naive to expect what predecessors left behind. With a foothold, Xiao Yang immediately felt bored in his heart. He reviewed his recent position and battle. Xiao Yang also had new opinions on his strength. According to the strength Xiao Yang is now sitting on, the 8-star and a half emperor is no longer a threat to Xiao Yang. Even if he really hands it over, Xiao Yang is sure to defeat it. As for the 9-star and half emperor, if he meets someone with strength like Tianying, Xiao Yang admits that if he fights alone, Xiao Yang will never be the enemy of the other party. Although he can delay temporarily by relying on Tianjua step, Xiao Yang will inevitably be defeated as long as it takes a long time. Of course, if you meet someone like Narwhal Snake whose strength has just broken through the early days of the 9-star and half emperor, Xiao Yang is sure to be on a par with the latter. Even if he is not an enemy, he will never let himself be too embarrassed. Generally speaking, with all the combat power Xiao Yang has now, Xiao Yang can only be equal to the strong ones in the early days of the 9-star and half emperor at most, and as for the stronger ones, it has to be said in 2 ways. Of course, even so, Xiao Yang is still dissatisfied with his strength. After all, there are 3 9-star and half emperors in the depths of the Shalin Mountains. Among them, Yang Lion and Xiong Gang will never be weaker than Tianying. As long as he can't defeat them in one day, Xiao Yang will never enter the hinterland of the Shalin Mountains, not to mention through the whole Shalin Mountains. Another point is the strange cold wind near the hinterland of Shalin Mountain Range. The terror of the cold wind is difficult to suppress even Xiao Yang's strange fire. It can be imagined that even if Tianying 3 people no longer stop Xiao Yang at that time, Xiao Yang can't wear it by virtue of the cold wind. With this in mind, Xiao Yang suddenly felt an inexplicable pressure. Now what he has to face doesn't seem to be as simple as it seems. Alas! Inexplicably sighed. Xiao Yang just lay on the stone bed, but suddenly a carp sat up and shook his head, throwing out the deep sleepiness in his mind. Sitting with his legs crossed, his hands immediately made practice knots, and his mind moved, and the burning determination skill in his body began to work. After a while, the energy of heaven and earth over Xiao Yang's head quickly gathered and condensed into a huge energy vortex. Between heaven and earth, the mottled energy of heaven and earth seemed to be under some traction at the moment, and quickly gathered towards Xiao Yang. Under the refining of different fire in Xiao Yang's body, it flows into the cyclone space in Xiao Yang's body after running along the meridians for a week. As Xiao Yang enters the crazy cultivation state, the void on one side of Xiao Yang's body suddenly distorts, and the figure of Ji Yu slowly emerges. Looking at Xiao Yang who was practicing hard in front of him, Ji Yu smiled faintly, and a look of comfort appeared in a pair of muddy old eyes. From Xiao Yang's move, he can see that Xiao Yang no longer wants to simply rely on his strength. Now Xiao Yang just wants to improve his own strength in the way of normal cultivation. It's better to ask others than yourself. Maybe this is the real idea in Xiao Yang's heart at the moment. In the twinkling of an eye, in Xiao Yang's repeated cultivation, 2 months have passed. In these 2 months, in addition to his crazy cultivation and fighting spirit, Xiao Yang only has the soul seal of the town and Tianjue step. The cultivation of fighting spirit is long, and there is no breakthrough in the wind of Tianjueba. Therefore, in addition, Xiao Yang can only focus on the soul seal of the town. After 2 months of repeated cultivation, finally, on this day, Xiao Yang ushered in what he had been looking forward to for a long time. Bang! With a dull bang, the cyclone in Xiao Yang's body was like a balloon bulging cyclone space, but it was suddenly loosened. Xiao Yang only felt that the whole body became lighter at the moment, and his soul couldn't help trembling. Kung Fu pays off those who have a heart. After all, crazy cultivation makes Xiao Yang's strength and successfully break through to the middle of the 5-star and half emperor. Although it means a bit of strong impact, Xiao Yang will not care too much about the rest as long as his strength breaks through. Cultivation is crazy. Xiao Yang just did something more crazy, but unexpectedly, in only 2 months, Xiao Yang really broke through the middle of the 5-star and half emperor. This is undoubtedly a great surprise for Xiao Yang, because it will mean that his cultivation strength will be improved again, and his combat effectiveness will be improved. At this time, Xiao Yang is even imagining his appearance when he broke through to the 6-star and half emperor. Standing up, Xiao Yang's naked upper body twisted slightly, and a crackling sound of bone collision came out in a short time, which also made Xiao Yang feel relieved. Feeling the fighting spirit filled in his body, Xiao Yang smiled at the corners of his mouth and wanted to go to the outside of the cave as soon as he took a step. And at the same time, outside the cave, in the dense forest, there was a large group of people coming here quickly. Fists and fists collided, the power of terror spread, the surrounding void suddenly collapsed, and the sound of buzzing swept around. The faces of Xiao Yang and the old man in black became more and more depressed at this moment. After a blow, the two turned together. Xiao Yang bent his elbow, turned back and hit the old man again. Hum. With a cold hum, the old man was also unwilling to show weakness. When his body was turned around, he blew out again at Xiao Yang. Bang! Facing the old man in black robe in front of him, Xiao Yang was not afraid. He punched and slapped every blow. Each blow was all killing moves, which were threatening. In a short moment, the two have fought for hundreds of rounds. The fighting spirit is vertical and horizontal. Energy storms sweep through the world one after another. The battle between the two has become more and more intense. In the fierce confrontation with Xiao Yang again and again, the old man in black robe couldn't help but feel dignified in his heart. He didn't expect that Xiao Yang's combat power was so terrible. Although he was only a 5-star and a half emperor, the real power was that even he could not defeat him. Moreover, in the next encounter, Xiao Yang's strange fire can always annoy him. Once he contacts it, his strength will be weakened by the strange fire, so that he will spend a lot of fighting spirit every time he makes a move, but the effect is very little. In addition, Xiao Yang's physical strength also shocked the black-robed old man. Every time he collided with Xiao Yang, the latter's terrible strength would numb the old man's arms, which virtually affected his real strength. For Xiao Yang's terrible physical strength, the old man in black robe thinks that he has only seen those powerful warcraft in his life, but he has never thought that a human can have the terrible physical strength comparable to warcraft. The old man even doubts that the young man in black robe in front of him is really a human. Boom! After another fierce confrontation, Xiao Yang and the black-robed old man retreated 100 feet respectively. Their eyes were far away from each other. Xiao Yang's face was calm, and the corners of his mouth were still holding a smile, but his breathing was a little hurried. On the contrary, the old man in black robe at the moment looked very dignified on an old face full of wrinkles. Under his sleeve robe, the left hand that had just collided with Xiao Yang couldn't stop shaking, and the whole left arm was no longer controlled by the old man. The fighting spirit in the body ran very fast and quickly removed the numbness on the left arm. The old man turned his head and looked not far behind him. The man in brocade robe was looking at Xiao Yang in the void with an unbelievable face at the moment. A pair of dark eyes showed a look of horror. "Young master, go quickly. Leave here first. I'll hold him. When you leave, I'll find you naturally." The old man's words fell, but he found that the man in brocade robe was not moved at all, as if he didn't listen at all. As soon as his face sank, the old man could not help feeling that he hated iron but not steel. With a sudden wave of his big sleeve, the hurricane roared. Facing the man in brocade robe, the old man shouted, "Sun Che." With a sharp drink, Sun Che suddenly regained his mind like a frightened bird. At the first sight of the old man in black robe, the color of fear in his eyes was stronger. Only after he was completely awake did he breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. "Go. Get out of here. This boy is not a layman. Don't attack hard today. Leave here and make a decision when you go back. Seeing that Sun Che was so cowardly, the old man in black wanted to slap him, but due to the situation at the moment, he had to drink angrily. Hearing the old man's words, Sun Che's face was surprised at first, and then he came back to his mind. He quickly nodded, turned his body, and quickly fled away from the Shaolin Mountains. From the beginning to the end, Xiao Yang looked at the two people in front of him with a light smile. Only when Sun Che turned and fled, did he smile and twist his neck. He smiled at the old man. Don't worry about him. None of you want to go today. With Xiao Yang's current strength, he still has to do his best in the face of the 9-star and half emperor. Naturally, he doesn't want to be known by the 4 major gates. Therefore, in order to protect himself, Xiao Yang is doomed to kill today. Smelling the speech, the old man in black couldn't help laughing grimly, and a look of disdain appeared in Xiao Yang's eyes. Although Xiao Yang can compete with his 9-star and half emperor with the strength of 5-star and half emperor by virtue of his strong combat power, he is confident. This is Xiao Yang's limit. After all, he is only a 5-star and half emperor. It is impossible to defeat the 9-star and half emperor, let alone kill him. Xiao Yang, I admit that your fighting power is really strong, but if you want to defeat me, do you think it's possible for you? The black-robed old man uttered a sneer, and his dark old eyes stared at Xiao Yang and said, "Ha ha, I wouldn't have said this if I wasn't absolutely sure." Xiao Yang smiled faintly and looked at the old man in black. The meaning in his words made the latter feel cold. Xiao Yang in front of him seemed to really have that ability. But then, the old man's face showed a ferocious color, and his eyes to Xiao Yang also became cruel. If he really gets to that point, he will make Xiao Yang pay for it anyway. "Boy, if you have the ability, come and have a try," the old man said to Xiao Yang in a dark tone. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body also quickly ran to his whole body at the moment. His dry palm suddenly grasped it, and a long gun also fell into his hand in an instant. Who? In this regard, Xiao Yang breathed a sigh of relief and released his fighting spirit outside his body. At this moment, he absorbed all his breath in his body. His breath also converged rapidly. His eyes closed slowly and stood in place. It seemed that he was waiting for the old man to kill him. This appearance is quite the opposite of that in the previous war. Seeing this strange scene, the old man could not help frowning slightly, and a suspicion rose in his heart. For a moment, he was neither moving nor motionless. Until 10 breaths later, the old man saw that Xiao Yang was still motionless, and finally something changed in his heart. Drink. At the bottom of my heart, the old man suddenly stepped on the void with the soles of his feet, his body twinkled, turned into a flash of lightning, and killed Xiao Yang with the power of lightning. In the twinkling of an eye, the old man's body had appeared in front of Xiao Yang. The long gun painted black in his hand was shocked, and the tip of the gun pierced Xiao Yang's eyebrows. However, at the next moment, when the sharp gun tip was less than an inch away from Xiao Yang's head, Xiao Yang closed his eyes, but suddenly opened his eyes. At the same time, Sen's white flame suddenly swept out of Xiao Yang's body and blew the old man in black in front of him. Sen's white flame turned into a flame storm, centered on Xiao Yang's body, quickly swept in all directions on the horizon, and the power of terror hit the old man in black first. The long gun in his hand was broken, and the old man's chest was forcibly crushed and sunken at the moment of the firestorm, and a few faint dull noises could be heard from his body. At the same time, the old man's ferocious face turned white in an instant. There was no blood on the whole face. His face looked very painful. He couldn't help spewing out red blood in his mouth. The blood was mixed with a large number of debris, which were crushed internal fragments in his body. Bang! With a bang, the old man's body suddenly flew backward like a kicked-out football. Finally, it fell hard between the downwind mountains and forests, smashing the earth below into a huge pit, and the old man's breath also quickly sank down. In the twinkling of an eye, the 9-star and half emperor, who was still fierce the moment before, at this moment, but it seems to have become a seriously injured body. At this moment, in the old man's heart, it was full of horror. With only one breath, he blew him into serious injury. It's hard to imagine how terrible Xiao Yang's strength is at this moment. No matter how he thought, he couldn't figure out why Xiao Yang, who was only 5-star and half emperor, could burst out the power to crush the 9-star and half emperor. Why on earth? Above the sky, Xiao Yang at this moment is haunted with Sen white flame. Originally, a pair of painted black eyes have turned into a pure white and black hair, which has also turned into Sen white color in an instant. The smell of that body is even more terrible and unimaginable. In short, Xiao Yang at this moment is quite different from Xiao Yang before. Xiao Yang's face was indifferent and his heart moved. Xiao Yang had appeared over the old man. The old man at the bottom of the huge pit stared at Xiao Yang over his head with serious injury. He felt incomparable fear in his heart. Shua. The next moment, with the sound of breaking the wind, Xiao Yang's body had appeared in front of the old man. Suddenly appeared in front of the old man. Xiao Yang Sen couldn't help showing a surprised color in his white pupils. Then he turned into a happy light and flashed across the bottom of his eyes. Seeing Xiao Yang suddenly appear, the old man's pale face has become like a dead man at the moment. The fear at the bottom of his heart is hard to express in words. You. The hoarse voice was hard to spit out from his mouth. The old man roared madly in the bottom of his heart, but his body was no longer under his control. Although he intended to, he still couldn't say the last question in his heart. Oh. Seeing this, Xiao Yang smiled faintly. At the moment, the expression on his face was the same as before. As I said, none of you can leave today. Listening to the plain voice in Xiao Yang's mouth, the old man was like a cold cellar all over, and his fear was even worse. Standing in front of the old man, Xiao Yang felt the boundless power in his body, and he couldn't help feeling a yearning in his heart. This is the real strong man. With his current strength, he is still too weak. It's true that what Xiao Yang controls at the moment is derived from the bone-quiet power in his body. Seeing the frightened look on the old man's face in front of him, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing. The old man was the same as his master and bullied. Such a person won't get any good results after all. Xiao Yang killed him today, which can also be regarded as eliminating harm for the people. Raised his palm, Xiao Yang wanted to fight, but the next moment, the look on Xiao Yang's face could not help but change slightly. I saw that the old man's body expanded rapidly, and the breath in his body suddenly became extremely violent. This guy wants to explode himself. His eyes were slightly frozen. I didn't expect this guy to be so decisive. He had to let Xiao Yang do it for him. Unfortunately, Xiao Yang wouldn't let him go on like this. With a sneer, Xiao Yang Meng pointed out and touched the center of the old man's eyebrows. At the same time, the forest white flame quickly poured into the old man's body along Xiao Yang's finger. Under the violent power of different fire, those violent fighting qi naturally could not be resisted. However, in a few moments, the fighting qi in the old man's body was burned by the bone spirit cold fire, and then the old man's body. With a roar of unwilling pain, the old man's body was completely burned into nothingness by different fire. So far, a 9-star and a half emperor died in Xiao Yang's hands. With indifferent eyes, Xiao Yang took back his eyes, moved his heart, flew over the sky again, looked at the direction Sun Che fled, and smiled at the corners of his mouth. Hey, luck is coming. I can't stop it. Tianjue step. Let me have a try. What's the feeling after the success of this wind state? Just now, Xiao Yang inadvertently let himself practice the Tianjue step for months. Skillfully, he succeeded in breaking through the wind, and Xiao Yang's speed was suddenly promoted to a new level. With a smile in his heart, Xiao Yang's white palm slowly crossed the void in front of him, feeling the flowing wind from his fingertips. Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed, and his mind moved. In a moment, Xiao Yang's body had appeared hundreds of feet away. Looking back, in Xiao Yang's eyes, he could see a nearly solid residual shadow of himself standing in place just now. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang was pleasantly surprised. Although with the help of Jiuyu's power at the moment, he could stride such a long distance just by flashing at will. Xiao Yang was almost sure that if he faced the eagle that day again at his current speed and his own strength, he would never suffer from his speed. Looking back, Xiao Yang wanted to start and go after Sun Che. Once he ran away, Xiao Yang was ready to face the 4 main doors, which was not what he wanted to see. But the next moment, just as he was leaving, Xiao Yang could not help frowning. He seemed to forget that there was the guy who caused him trouble. At the same time, among the scarred ruins after the war, a delicate body that looked extremely weak due to injury was lifted up by Xiao Yang's invisible soul power from a complete rock and slowly flew to Xiao Yang's face. Looking at the soft and delicate body in front of Xiao Yang's eyes, Xiao Yang couldn't help recalling the soft feeling when he pushed his hands on the girl. Because the girl was falling against Xiao Yang at that time, it was self-evident about the position where his hands fell. Immediately, Xiao Yang's old face quickly turned red like a fever. He coughed twice in a hurry. Then he remembered that Sun Che had not solved the problem. If he ran away, it would be another big trouble. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang's face finally recovered. With a flick of his fingers, a black lightning burst out in an instant and quickly chased Sun Che in the direction he fled. Above the sky, Xiao Yang looked at the North King returning from afar. Xiao Yang showed a Senhan smile at the corners of his mouth. His eyes fell and looked at the 7 people in the mountain forest below. Xiao Yang always doesn't like to leave any possible trouble for himself. Even if the 7 people have been seriously injured, according to common sense, they can't survive in the Shaolin Mountains, but there are always exceptions. If one of them really leaves the Shaolin Mountains alive, the final result will also bring endless trouble to Xiao Yang. In order to avoid future trouble, Xiao Yang will not let any of them go. Whoosh dash. At this moment, with the help of bone quiet power, Xiao Yang thought a little. At the moment of Chenjua's step, Xiao Yang appeared in front of a grey-robed old man among the 7 people. In the face of this sudden appearance of Xiao Yang, the look on the old man's face in grey robe suddenly became frightened. However, before he could speak, Xiao Yang immediately bent his fingers and flicked. A dark white streamer fell into the old man's eyebrows in an instant, and the old man's mouth, which was about to speak, suddenly solidified at the moment. Then, a thick layer of solid ice quickly condensed from the old man's body surface, and the whole person was frozen in the blink of an eye. Leaving a faint hum, Xiao Yang's body flashed again and appeared in front of another person. When the shadow of Xiao Yang dispersed, the layer of solid ice wrapped around the old man in the grey robe broke up with a bang and turned into a pile of ice dregs full of cold air, and the old man in the grey robe disappeared. Under the action of bone spirit cold fire, although the old man looks only frozen, in fact, his body has been burned by different fire. An 8-star and a half emperor, in terms of the whole western region, can be called a top existing strong man. In front of different fires, he didn't even have a chance to make a sound. This makes people feel very frightened. Strange fire is really terrible. As the most domineering force between heaven and earth, the terror of different fire has been revealed in this short moment. Seeing Xiao Yang, the grey-robed old man was suddenly surprised. With the old man in front of him, the grey-robed old man didn't hesitate at all. He knew that he would die right now and acted decisively immediately. At the moment of Xiao Yang's appearance, the old man quickly presented cumbersome knots with his hands, then clenched his hands and smashed his chest. A big mouthful of blood gushed out, quickly condensed a blood sign in front of him, and disappeared into the old man's body in a flash. Then the next moment, the breath in the old man's body was also the moment when the blood amulet entered the body. It suddenly rose. The original strength in the middle of the 8-star and half emperor was raised to the later stage of the 8-star and half emperor in just a few seconds. Then, without hesitation, the old man flashed back to the rear. Seeing the old man whose breath suddenly increased, Xiao Yang was not moved at all. His eyes narrowed and murmured in a low voice. "The secret method. But that's it." The voice just fell, but Xiao Yang couldn't help but let out a light but he didn't expect that the old man should make a seal in his hand again while dodging and retreating. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body suddenly became violent. Look at this, the old man seems to want to explode. Self-explosion. That guy can't do it. It's up to you. Xiao Yang sneered. The next moment, Xiao Yang appeared in front of the old man again. The printing formula in his hand is not finished yet. When the old man saw Xiao Yang again, he suddenly felt a sense of panic. If Xiao Yang tried to kill him at such a close distance, he would not even have the chance to explode. "Oh, want to explode? Let me help you." With a sneer, Xiao Yang's palm suddenly stretched out, and his white palm suddenly clenched at the old man. The next moment, the old man only felt a terrible force coming from the space around him. The terrible force even made him have no possibility to resist. Then, while the old man's eyes burst out with extreme panic, the power also instantly pinched and exploded the fighting spirit in his body and even in his body. Bang! The earth-destroying energy storm swept through the mountains and forests. Under the energy storm, the other 3 seriously injured 7.5 emperors also failed to escape the fate of being crushed to pieces. In a sunny forest clearing, Xiao Yang is sitting cross-legged on a blue stone. The internal burning formula moves slowly, restoring the fighting spirit Xiao Yang consumed previously. On the grass not far from his face, at this moment, a beautiful long-skirt girl with white skin is lying flat on the grass, with her long soft hair spread around, which makes the girl look more feminine. The girl's eyes were closed, and her pale pretty face gradually recovered ruddy under the action of the pill, followed by a lot of weak breath. "I believe the girl will wake up soon." The breeze blew, and the girl's long hair flew in the wind. After the wind, the girl's beautiful cheeks were covered. The girl in the coma felt a dull spirit. A strand of hair covered the girl's delicate nose, which aggravated the girl's breathing. Until a moment later, The girl who felt dyspnea suddenly woke up from the coma with a slight red face. The weak and delicate body lying on the grass suddenly sat up. The girl who woke up immediately looked around. When she found that Sun Che and his party were not there, she relaxed. The color of worry on her pretty face also disappeared immediately, but the next moment, Xiao Yang's thin figure appeared in the girl's line of sight. At the first sight of seeing Xiao Yang, the expression on the girl's cheek couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Immediately, it was recalled that before he was unconscious, he seemed to see a figure. It happened that he came out of the cave. While thinking of this in the girl's heart, her memory is also a vague memory. At the last moment of her coma, someone pushed her away from the front with his hands, and it was at that time that the man's hands seemed to be pushed in front of his chest. Thinking of this, the girl still had a beautiful face with pale color, which immediately became red as if it had been roasted by fire, and the shame and anger in the girl's heart could not be further increased. She stood up with a little effort. The girl didn't stop. Her delicate body moved, and her footsteps came quickly to Xiao Yang. With the rapid movement of a pair of light and dexterous feet, the girl's graceful and charming body has come to Xiao Yang in the twinkling of an eye. At the same time, the girl's jade-like hand is lifted into the air, with a look of shame and anger, and mercilessly slaps Xiao Yang's beautiful face. With a crisp sound, the jade hand was blocked from the air by a more powerful white palm. Seeing this scene, the look on the girl's cheek couldn't help changing slightly. She quickly looked up, but she found that Xiao Yang, who had closed his eyes tightly, just didn't know when, had widened his eyes and was staring at her. "This young lady, I have saved you by saying good or bad. Is that how you treat your savior?" With the girl's beautiful eyes like crystal, Xiao Yang frowned and said in a slightly heavy tone, "Asshole. I touched Miss Ben, and now I dare to say it's Miss Ben's life-saving benefactor. In my opinion, you're with those guys." Seeing Xiao Yang's verbal appearance, the girl was even more ashamed and angry. She scolded Xiao Yang angrily, exposed half of her sleeves, and exerted her arm as white as a lotus root, struggling to take back her delicate jade hand from Xiao Yang's hand. Seeing this, Xiao Yang loosened his right hand holding the latter's wrist. But then, Xiao Yang heard the words from the girl's mouth. The look on an old face suddenly turned red. He quickly lowered his head and coughed a few times, trying to pretend not to know. However, because Xiao Yang was sitting on a high bluestone, although he had lowered his head, his red face still fell into the girl's eyes. Seeing this scene, the girl was immediately angry. The jade hand raised again and wanted to wave it to Xiao Yang again. "Hey, little girl, don't push an inch. You said I touched you." "Well, you said, where did I touch you?" "You." The sudden voice of the words made the girl's men act slightly, but then, after she heard what Xiao Yang said clearly, the look on her pretty face quickly became crimson, and her mouth was angry and speechless. The girl never thought that the man in black who looked okay in front of her was such a scoundrel. A moment ago, her face clearly showed an embarrassed look. It was only a short moment. How could she change her mouth and deny it immediately? Moreover, what Xiao Yang said also made the girl silent for a time. After all, she is a girl. From this point of view, she still has her reserve as a girl in her heart. Otherwise, if she were someone else, I'm afraid she would have to fight with Xiao Yang for a result because of her poor state. Therefore, Xiao Yang's words suppressed the girl. Otherwise, in order to let Xiao Yang admit his behavior, should the girl really say to Xiao Yang that he touched his chest? If so, I'm afraid that without talking about Xiao Yang first, she can shame herself to death. Xiao Yang, who had just grasped this point, pretended not to have done anything wrong and said to the girl. In fact, Xiao Yang had already been in his heart. But even so, when the girl looked at Xiao Yang, she still looked incredulous, turned a big white eye at the latter, twisted her delicate body, and walked slowly towards the forest in the distance. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang finally breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately pretended to have suffered a loss. He snorted to the girl with an unhappy face and said in a neutral tone, I saved you somehow. You slandered me as soon as you opened your mouth. If you don't say it for the time being, you don't even have a word to thank me. Alas, a good man can't do it in this world." With a sad and bitter sigh on his face, Xiao Yang got up lonely and wanted to go in the opposite direction to the girl. However, at this time, the girl who had turned away turned back again, raised her willow eyebrows, put her hands on her hips and sternly said to Xiao Yang, Don't think I can't see it. Your strength is only 5-star and half emperor. But among the group of people chasing me, there is a 9-star and half emperor. How can you escape from the old man? In my opinion, you are just with that group of people. I'm afraid you have another purpose why you don't catch me back. The figure he had just turned back again. Xiao Yang looked at the girl with a light smile. His eyes turned, and a joking smile appeared at the corners of his mouth, saying, "Well, since you keep saying that I'm with that group of people, I'll just send you back. Anyway, you can't thank me for saving my life, so you can just return you." "I'm sure they will thank me." Xiao Yang smiled and really came to the girl. Seeing Xiao Yang's face not like a joke, the girl was slightly surprised. She had to say that she was really afraid that she would fall into the hands of those people again. Although she didn't believe Xiao Yang in front of her, she could still have some confidence in the face of Xiao Yang, but once she fell into the hands of those guys, she definitely didn't even have a chance to heal. A flash of thought passed through the heart, and the girl hurriedly mobilized the few remaining anger in her body. Suddenly, the wound which was not healed in the body was touched again at this time, which made the girl's mouth corner unable to stop smoking. But in order not to let herself fall into the hands of those guys again, the girl bit hard with her silver teeth, forcibly lifted the fighting spirit in her body, turned her delicate body suddenly, moved her body, and quickly flew away into the mountains and forests behind her. Seeing that the girl really turned and ran away under her own words, Xiao Yang immediately smiled jokingly, but immediately he seemed to think of something, frowned and moved, so he quickly chased up with Chenjua step. For example, today Jubu has broken through to the wind state under Xiao Yang's cultivation. In this way, Xiao Yang's speed has been greatly improved again. Now he is not afraid of the Sky Eagle at the level of 9 stars and half emperors alone, let alone chasing a girl with 4 stars and half emperors. In an instant, Xiao Yang appeared right behind the girl. The tip of his nose stirred slightly. He smelled the fragrance left in the air by the girl's flying. Xiao Yang smiled happily and smiled at the girl in front. "Hey, I said, I lied to you. Those guys have been killed by me. You just can't get back to them. Don't run so hard." However, the girl didn't believe Xiao Yang's words at all. In her eyes, Xiao Yang didn't even have the ability to fight against the 7-star and half emperors. However, at the moment, Xiao Yang even told her that he killed those high-level half emperors, and there was a 9-star and half emperor among them. This is nonsense in the girl's ears. Feeling that the distance between herself and Xiao Yang was getting closer and closer, the girl suddenly felt a horizontal in her heart, and all the fighting spirit in her body poured out at the moment. The speed of the girl's body flying forward also soared sharply. The girl's body turned into a flexible lightning in the mountains and forests, running rapidly between the mountains and forests. At the same time, the girl's pretty face, which had just recovered a little ruddy color, quickly became white. Until a certain moment, the girl's body suddenly stagnated, and the injury in her body broke out again. Before the girl had time to respond, her eyes were black and she fainted in mid-air. At the same time, Xiao Yang also hurried to manifest his birth form from the void, and took one of them in his arms. This video will end here.